Well, howdy. Um, it's weird that I say that I'm not streaming, but so this is um, I guess kind of a channel update plan, um, and I guess a bit of forgive me if I'm not gonna make a lot of sense. I'm like half an edible in. I just got off work. Just trying to chill. Like tomorrow's stream day. I'm literally recording this at like almost 2 a.m. Um, the uh the base footage that is going to be kind of up in the broadcast window up here is some Tarkov that I recorded, which that takes a hell of a lot less to like do and process than streaming it. And I might be able to end up at least streaming it. I don't know about streaming and recording it. There's a few things I might be able to tweak either graphically or with which servers and stuff I'm actually connected to make that a bit better. So if I'm like deciding to stream it one day, maybe it'll work a little bit better because it did not work very well. It was just too stuttery. But as far as the footage here, there was a little beginning bit that I did a scav run just to see how it ran while recording, which there are some you will notice that there are some like skipping bits or little weirdness that this game is kind of hard on the GPU a little bit. Um, but speaking of GPU, on that scav raid, I did end up finding a GPU inside of a computer, and that was the last one that I needed for a quest. And I don't know, in this, I recorded this footage and stuff for this video. And I guess I'll just take it as a sign that maybe I'm doing something that I should be doing. I guess just the game saying, "Hey, here you go. Here's a little treat. Just here you go." And then also further proceeding into the actual PMC round that is playing here on customs. Uh, I looted a shotgun that had a piece of something for another shotgun of the same kind that I wanted to make, and now I have two good shotguns, both of different sizes. So that kind of works out. And just for the I guess let's grab the sake of loadout. That's an SA-58, decent scope, loaded mostly with M80 and topping it off with FMJs. And yeah, I've got a little side thermal on there. It comes in a little handy in this round. I like putting them on 45-degree sights, especially with the shoulder swapping stuff that you can do now. I mean, that's been a function of the game for a little while. But anyway, that little customs raid, I did okay. It's mostly just for eye candy, instead of just looking at my dumb face the whole time. Um, so my plan for this video, more or less, is it's kind of it's a little off the cuff. Like I said, forgive me. But like I said, I want to give a viable like rundown of what I want to do with the channel, and get into some life stuff and get into I guess some real honest stuff kind of I guess about myself and my thoughts on a few things. And um in a lot of ways this is kind of like into my putting a bookmark of uh, uh accountability, I guess, to myself, and also like kind of putting it out in the public. And it's like, hey, you actually doing good things for yourself and all that. So it's a little multi-purpose here. So it's going to be a little out of it's going to be a little weird. It's going to be off the cuff. I did write out some notes last night on where I wanted to take it, but it's going to be a bit messy. So um more or less, as far as like my plans for the channel, or even like the plans of even starting streaming and like the YouTube stuff, it's kind of it's a bit multifolded. Um, like to some degree, yeah, I kind of want to try doing the YouTube streamer thing, but it's also like, hey, I've got a lot of time on my hands even outside of work and whatnot, and um for like I've had a lot of time, and I could have technically been doing this for like a couple of years and actually probably gotten somewhere by now, but it's one of those like better late than never kind of things. Um Although I picked a really weird time to start streaming because that's when all the VTuber drama stuff really started, and VShojo literally shut down like a couple weeks ago. So that's fun. Um, but um, I've been thinking a lot this summer on while also trying to do work and get art assets and stuff made to make this a little bit more presentable. I've been thinking about where what exactly I want to do with at least the YouTube end of things. Um, for one thing that I wanted to do, especially with streaming, was I wanted to get better at like just talking to people and like getting some, I guess, figuring out better ways to like get some of my thoughts and ideas out and talking to people whenever they're actually in my chat because I'm still tiny. Sometimes that helps if they're at least a little engaging, or if I've even it's hard to find for me. It's hard to find things to talk about without while like focusing on a game or something like that. So this is kind of like a little happy medium for this that I've decided. Um, but um, okay, so like as far as like stream schedule or anything like that, I've posted on Twitter not too long ago that Tuesday evenings and Friday nights I might be adding on, which I didn't start this week. I had some things to take care of and just stresses to like figure out, um, and like it kind of also putting this together and like thinking about how I'm gonna do it. Um, but as far as like the streaming, as far as like streaming on Twitch and stuff like that, my next big step is literally just hitting affiliate, and I'm not too far out from that. As far as like the main thing I need is like I think followers and then maybe a bit more consistent viewership. It's like you need an average of like I think it's like 3 viewers for like a certain amount of time, but you need to hit 50 followers, which I'm at like hold up, where am I at? Where am I at on my followers? Yeah, I'm not a professional at all. Oof. I'm at 32. I'm literally like 18 away. Oh, oops. Yeah, that was the last VOD starting to replay. Oopsie. Anyway, so as far as the things that I have done, uh, actually, I probably shouldn't get into that yet. Um, yeah, bear with me. Oof. Streaming stuff. Ugh. Um, so far the Sunday stuff is probably still going to stay consistent. Um, I do want to try to get in more time on the Tuesdays and the Friday nights, and I kind of want to do something a little bit different for each of the days. Like Sunday, obviously, is like Dark Souls Sunday, where I'm at a certain point I will run out of at a certain point I will run out of Souls games. Um, and sadly, like Bloodborne is not on PC, and that would also give me some extra time. And Bloodborne is one that I've really wanted to play, but I don't have a PlayStation, and then they just didn't make a. They made a PC port for like 1.0, and it was very buggy because it was a port, and I don't think it really exists anymore. I think you can emulate it and stuff like that, but a coworker of mine did that to play it on PC, and it gets a little weird sometimes, or certain things break, and then you just have to hope or pray to God or whatever. I don't know. You probably have to pray to one of the weird creature demons that populates the that nice Victorian, not so nice Victorian uh type of Dark Souls era. But that will likely still continue. There are actually a couple of other Souls games um, that aren't necessarily like FromSoft that might make good candidates. Like one I've been thinking about is oh, what's the one? It's made by the one of the developers that made Peak, which I do also have, and that's kind of fun. I can't wait to actually get some time to actually play it with some friends. But it's a like Crab's Tale, something like that. But it's like it's the Souls game where you're a hermit crab doing doing Souls type stuff, like fighting through the ocean and stuff like that. Looks like fun. So I might end up nabbing that game after like Elden Ring, which as far as where I'm at with like Dark Souls 1, I've I've got to do all the Great Lords, and then I've got to actually finish the end game and stuff after that, which is like Ash Lake and then other things, and then getting into um like actually getting into the end game, which is still going to be several weeks. I'm not flying through Dark Souls 1 as fast as the other ones. It's very differently paced. It has different kinds of difficulties, and boy, I'll tell you what, the Souls level up economy is a little bit like for my like skill with the where the engine's at and whatnot. It's a little it's difficult because there's a lot less fine tuning. Like 2 and 3 had many major improvements, and honestly, so far, I do like 1 in how it and I'll try to cut this down short because I'm kind of rambling on it, but you know, giving some favorite bits. But 1 is clearly like there. I'm sure there was refinement from like Demon Souls and stuff, but I look back at 2 and playing that for the first time, and it's like shit. I think that's still officially going to end up being my favorite Souls game as far as how it's like paced and presented and stuff, and some of the story elements. And then 3, I would say, has just has a really fun sandbox. But it's a much shorter game. I mean, there's a whole 24 hours less. Now, it's a game I've played a lot before, so I kind of knew a lot of things and where I was going and what I was doing. Um, but it's just a shorter game, and there's some things that playing the other two, it's like, oh god, this one could have been so much cooler in some ways, but I do love the sandbox. Um, there's that's gonna, like I said, Dark Souls Sunday is still gonna be continuing well into the near future, um, as consistently as I can. Um, but as far as like Tuesday and like Friday, Tuesday I've got a few horror games that I've never finished, and some of them I've never touched. I kind of it's one of those things where you buy a game like years ago and then you just don't end up like touching it or whatever. And I've got some amnesia games like about like Soma, um, like Alien Isolation. Like there's a couple of great gems in there that I could play, and it would be a good time. I feel like, and maybe you guys get to maybe y'all get to see me actually scared, um, which is very hard to do these days, at least for games. But uh, Fridays, I'm not 100% sure yet, because it's still one of those nights where I get off work kind of late, and then like the roomies going to bed like a couple hours after that. The 12 to 3 4 a.m. time slot is kind of what I'm looking to try to nab, get some late night going up. Um, Still not 100% sure what I want to do for Fridays, but um, I am looking to at least add 2 more days to my schedule, as of the moment. But that kind of leads us into the next. It kind of leads us into the next bit of concern. So, um, I've said this on stream quite a bit. Like the world's getting weird. It's falling apart in several different ways. The cracks are starting to show. One of the biggest major things is the economy, and I don't think I'm alone in finding it weird that um, is it tracking better with the lights on? Let me just turn those down. I'm trying to make sure I get decent. Trying to make sure I get decent tracking so this doesn't look completely awkward. Um, but like, I mean, everything's kind of gone into the shitter, and I'm American, obviously. If that isn't known already, and based on my accent or lack of one, um, it's kind of getting a little weird out there. But one of the bigger concerns and just weirdness things with how things have gone is like, excuse me, things like technology and non necessities and stuff like that have become extremely cheap because of how just because of what we've prioritized as humans, like looking for making things easier through technology, commodities, people figuring out that, oh hey, cell phones are basically just cell phones and the internet, and everything else is just something that people end up really soaking their time, their money, et cetera, into. So then, just focus on figuring out how to make that stuff cheaply as possible while neutering the amount of like jobs and whatnot in the United States and stuff like that, or just ruining the economy a little bit, kind of stuff. But the basic necessities like food, housing, stuff like that is fucking absurdly expensive. Um, I don't need to. I don't think I need to go over any of the any of the data. You could see everyone screaming about it if you just look up anything along the subject. But what I as far as my job, I've said it on Twitter and I've said it on stream, so I'll say it here. I'm just a fucking pizza delivery guy. Um, and it's there's things I like about the that I've liked about the job. I've worked at the particular location for like 2 years, but um, ran into some dumb finance, and I'll get into this a little bit more. But I've ran into some dumb financial troubles. Me and the roommate that I've got, and you make economic mistakes, and you eventually feel the pain for it. Um, and one of the things that I've really been thinking about over the summer is that um, like work's just kind of like work has gotten sucky at my location. A lot of management issues, weirdness with like customer service and some employees and stuff. And it's there are still things about it that I like, but it's one of those things where I don't necessarily enjoy going into the job anymore. And the other aspect is um, I'm in a pretty decent amount of like credit card debt, and then there was an apartment kind of fuck up where between moving from like basically I moved out of my parents' house um with some roomies and moved into an apartment. Some shit happened at and I'll get into this a little. I'll try to brush up on this a little bit, but some shit happened at the job I was working at with the apartment, which was with my family. Um, and I've said many things about my family and stuff on the stream, but it was very much it was really much a hostile work environment, along with really uh, hard labor, bread delivery, like guy who drives around in a box truck to like grocery stores, restaurants, all that kind of fun business. And it's very physically demanding. You have to deal with a lot of bullshit. You got to deal with a bunch of bullshit managers. Sometimes, unless you actually have a good manager at like a store or a business, something like that. Um, but um, ended up quitting very quickly, although it was something that was already on my mind for a few months because um, my dad, who was my boss, is basically a child who doesn't know how to divide personal things outside of work and would always kind of bring up he would bring up things like a and I don't mean to sound like super sexist, but this is just how it kind of works for some women. Just constantly bring up old news or this or that or the other and point it out and hang it over your head because he just wanted to shame because shaming was the effective way to more or less squeeze down. He was a bully. He became something he hated. Um, he used to fight bullies and stuff like that when he was in school, and eventually, just over the years and certain things that happened and whatnot over his life, but also with like growing up in the family and stuff like that, he just kind of became what he hated, and I saw it. And at a certain point, he did some real fucked up things. Um, said some real fucked up things, suggested some real fucked up things, and then also just didn't have any solid like laying down of this is how we operate, this is how we do things. And I wasn't alone. My brother was in the business and he owned like a few bread routes and had some employees and stuff like that. But it was a mess. It was a bit of a mess. Not only with just the work itself, but also with just him as a boss. Because, like I said, he just wanted to make everything personal all the fucking time. And like left that job, and I was getting paid like a good 40K a year, which is pretty much what I need right now with my current living situation. So we'll get to there. Um, and I live like a not very I live like a mile and a half away from the workplace, and he can be very petty and spiteful and strange. So it was just one of those. I don't know what he's gonna do. So we tried to make exodus of the apartment quickly, but we ended up leaving like a month and a half early, and it was we didn't recheck our lease to see when we were actually like good to go, and got locked into having to like it's in collections, and it's like halfway done now. It's still going to take a little while longer with at least the base payments, which I don't want to keep making base payments anymore. I want to actually like clean up my financials and whatnot, like I should have for the last couple of years. But um, along with that little fiasco that I've been dealing with for a couple, at this point, it's been like 2 years. But along with that, I kind of ended up getting into really bad spending habits and a lot of doom spending, I guess is the term that you would use now. Um, I've been watching like Caleb Hammer and like the Dave Ramsey financial advice like show and stuff like that. So there's a few terms that I've found to actually describe some of my behaviors there. And upon leaving, I guess upon leaving the bread job and like moving to the place that we're at now, I've had I've had two jobs since leaving the bread business, and they've all been like pretty subpar. Um, I worked at a fast casual place making like 14 an hour um, for a time, and that was not enough money, uh, much at all, and that wasn't very. My mental health was already pretty shot after a lot of bits of like rough childhood bits, and then some spicier elements that came up in high school, and things happen, but it just wasn't doing very well a lot in my early 20s, and I'm almost 26 now. It's been a bit. I'm still having to fix and monitor a few things about myself, but the fast casual restaurant I ended up leaving because I already had a back injury, and my dad was actually partially to blame because it's like, hey, go to the gym with me and with a personal trainer because I'm going to be on a health kick, and then never I'm going to be on like the third health kick I've ever gone on in my life, and then I'm just going to quit it after like 3 4 months, and then I'm never going to go back to the gym, but I'm going to constantly hound my youngest son on how, yeah, I gave you this gym membership. And it's like, dude, I already work fucking 12 to 16 hours a goddamn day because I'm cleaning up other people's messes, because I ran vacations for like the bread route stuff, because the company, the overhead umbrella company that we worked for, just kept getting shittier and shittier and shittier, and passing responsibilities off onto their like driver delivery guy employees, and that is it's ooh. I should make a commentary of it on that now that I'm thinking about it. There are so many stories I've got from the bread days, and just absolute company bullshit. Um, but oh shit, where was I going with that? Fuck. But oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was basically like, as far as like that injury I mentioned, I was doing a sumo deadlift with my dad and his personal trainer at the gym, and The sumo deadlift. I already have a week back, like just as is. It always was. So I was kind of being told to do an exercise movement that really not. I really should not have been being jumped to something like that, and I ended up doing a single movement wrong, and I basically halfway slipped a disc in my lower spine. Um, and then I because we were a family of we don't go to doctors and we don't trust that kind of things, and it's I just didn't end up getting treatment of any kind for like the first 5 or 6 months after the injury, and that was hell. But um I've had continuing spinal issues like since then, because once you screw your spine up, you get there's things that can happen down the line if you're not careful or if you don't end up recovering the right way. And sometimes it's just when you hurt something like that, you're just never the same. Well, at the fast casual restaurant thing, I was sleeping one night and I was sleeping on my back, and for some cockamamie reason, and I'm not 100% sure why, but I woke up one night after a pretty rough time, and as far as like where my body was positioned, like I was laying flat and my feet were pointing towards the ceiling, but my torso was like 90 to 100 degrees like oriented to my left. So like my shoulders compared to like my lower half were basically like leaning over and like pushing into like my face was like pushing into the pillow and pushing into the mattress and stuff. And I woke up with a really horrid back pain. Like to the point where it's the technical term would be like like fairly like moderate to severe sciatica, where part of my spine is actually pushing onto the the big nerve cord that goes down your spine. Um, had to re get into like chiropractic and some other affordable treatment methods to combat that. It's a bit better, but it's my back is fucked. It's not a fun time. I'm usually constantly uncomfortable. I sit in weird positions and not necessarily by choice. Um, that like if you can probably hear the chair scooching around a lot when I'm on streams and probably on here because I kind of have to constantly adjust. It's not a fun time. Um, but after that, had to switch jobs and then had to end up instead of trying to go for my mistake was first of all after quitting very abruptly from the bread business. My first mistake actually was not having good spending habits beforehand, before just having a fucking mental breakdown more or less, and a I'll put it like this: I was not okay, and does anyone know if anyone knows what a Keltec KS7 is? Um, the barrel doesn't taste good. Um, yeah, it was it was one of those kinds of it was one of those kinds of breakdowns. And in the kind of shitty part is I'm doing a little bit better, but there are still some times where I actually regret not finishing that, just simply because life's hard. But at the same time, it's like I did it. A lot of things I ended up doing it to myself. Um, but one of my biggest mistakes, besides just having poor financials, like door dashing stuff, doom spending, um, kind of doing the thing where you end up getting stuff even though you know you can't really like afford it, or stuff that you only end up using sometimes and not very often, or oh hey, I've got this that and the other, and then I just haven't touched it for a long while kind of stuff. um a bit of you know good bit of a mistake there. Shit, that's already been like half hour recording. I'll have to cut some of this out, but to make it a bit more concise. But I might have to actually add some footage. Oof. Um, but anyway, at this point, um, like looking back and like looking at where I'm at right now, I've kind of I've just made a lot of fucking mistakes, and like this video is kind of a way of like I guess owning up to all of that and making some making some manner of public accountability for myself, because in a lot of ways in the last few years since moving out, even though my family situation was pretty sucky and really weird, and it got real kind of culty and abusive before I just cut contact and left everyone behind. um, I didn't make a lot of good choices, and I actively decided not to, simply because I thought I wasn't worth anything, and I wasn't worth anything to myself.
Oh, the sniper.
And
Why
uh,
is he still hiding out there somewhere? I just can't see him.
like mental, like at a certain point, like you are your brain at a certain point, but also not. I believe in like the power. I believe in like the soul and the power of like the soul, the spirit, whichever, whatever little special dust that separates human from animal that isn't necessarily just biological. I believe there is some element of stuff to that, but that was just off for a very long time, and
I didn't exactly mean to
um,
do that. Let's put the one back in.
I ended up picking up a lot of bad habits, and a lot of bad mentalities, either from myself or from my upbringing and whatnot, and inherited a lot of bad habits from my parents, some of my friends, etc., etc. Um, there's a few there's a few bad habits that that I've wanted to break since like the start of the year. Like starting the stream and the YouTube channel and stuff was a stepping point to more or less drive myself into
Where's home?
doing something that isn't just like going to work, like getting up, going to work, eating like shit, treating myself like shit, and like, give me something to work for that's mine and my own. And being able to do Sundays fairly consistently, and like actually wanting to actually stream, it's been good. I think it's been good for me. It at least gives me someone to look forward to. But uh, for anyone who's ever watched my streams, like I don't hide it. I vape, and I've got like little uh like weed carts and stuff like that. That's one bad habit that I picked up. The first thing I did beforehand was actually drinking. I kind of became a mild alcoholic, mostly because I couldn't sleep, because bread work was that stressful. Everything was that stressful. I'm the kind of guy that when I'm off work,
Watch
there
out.
has to be like a solid 4 or 5 hours. It doesn't matter what kind of work. There's like 4 or 5 hours that it takes for me to like wind down, and that alcohol is a horrible tool to use to wind yourself down. And um uh eventually my body just like started to reject alcohol, and I don't drink.
Oh,
I
there.
do
Just grab
not
one of
I
these.
don't really drink much anymore. It's been literally months since I've ever had a drink, and it's months in between even having something light, and it's probably been about a year since I've had any form of liquor, and I have no desires to like do that kind of thing again, and I really have like very little desire to even like get a beer or even something light alcoholic. Like it's once in a blue moon that I do that, and if I get like a 6 pack of something or other, sometimes I'll have it done in like 2 weeks, or sometimes it takes like a month to get through like a 6 pack of like some like Mike's Hard, or like a like a 6 pack of Pobs or something like that. I just don't drink anymore. Not often. It's been, like I said, it's been months. But I replaced alcohol with marijuana after it became a bit more legal and easier to get in the United States and stuff like that, which I think I will end up doing I do want to keep doing these like commentary style things so I can get some of my thoughts out. More or less, I want to be able to get it out of my head and figure out how to organize my thoughts and whatnot. But I replaced alcohol with marijuana, and it had positive and negatives in there, but it's expensive, and with the income and whatnot that I've had, it's not good. Um, if I run the math and if I run the frequency, and if I run my usage, it's not the most pleasant. Like a 1 gram little oil cart or something, I may. It kind of depends on how stressed I am, but I'd end up running through like a 1 gram cart anywhere in about 10 to 14 days. And around here, they're usually about 20 bucks before tax. And you do that every 10 to 14 days, and you run the math for how much it takes for like a year of that, and that's not great. um but one of the types that I ended up nabbing are like larger quantity, which at least for like price to amount ratio and stuff like that was definitely better, sort of. Most of the time it would take me like a sort of it would take me about a month to get through one of the things that I ended up settling on as a happy medium. But it's vaping and um the marijuanas is not a it's expensive, and for my income it was not a good decision to keep doing that. But like I said, mental health stuff, and like I said, this year's trying to find something else to focus on so that I can kind of climb out of it. um and my my goal for the year was and is, I should say, is to eliminate as many of those bad habits, financial, how I treat myself, the things that I do in my free time that are just not that are either not productive or just not good for me. Um, try to do something that isn't just like just kind of laying down in my soul and just like vegetating until like the next day or until like the next stream, um, stuff like that. And it's I'm almost like we're almost hitting the I call it the tail end of summer, because in the state that I live in, August is like the worst. Usually, it's the worst month. We're hitting what's usually the hottest week of the year. Like this week or next week, it really just kind of depends on how the weather decides to play nice. And so I consider it the end of summer, and that's when I at least wanted to get most of my stream editions and whatnot finished. And um, I've got most things done, and I still need to give some shout outs and whatnot on Twitter, which I'll probably end up doing this weekend. Um, because some people do. I need to give kudos to the people I've paid and um,
Somebody else.
show off some of that stuff, especially the stuff that I can't use yet because I'm not affiliated. And at least give a sneak peek, sort of, I guess, for some of that stuff. But more or less, like I said, bad habits, poor choices of work. I just didn't have a lot of. I was in a state, I guess, where like a mental and physical state of like not knowing what I am capable of, and I've had to grow up a little bit. I've had to heal over a lot of very very rough things, at least from my perspective. But even at a certain point, it's like again, in a lot of ways, I think I'm kind of a pussy on certain things, or just letting myself be a pussy about certain things. And you know, I'm literally like 3 months and a few days away from being 26. I'm 25 years old, and granted, there's a lot of people in my age group are not doing very well. I'm literally just another. branch of the statistics based on habits and outcome and stuff like that. But it's like I said, I've been watching a lot of like Dave Ramsey and Caleb Hammer like financial audit vids over the at least like the Dave Ramsey stuff was like weeks ago or like months ago, like early in the summer. And then the Caleb Hammer stuff I started mainlining like this week at work, just listening to that while on the road and whatnot, and a little bit at home. And while he's like sitting there screaming at and being exasperated at his guests and stuff like that, I started imagining that like I was in the chair and I was getting grilled by him and whatnot, and looking, just taking a really, really hard and brutal look at my just at my habits and what I'm deciding to do. And um I've gotten some things out of the way, and it's like, okay, everything is either everything is gonna fucking fall apart here soon enough, or like certain things are gonna destabilize. Like the job market's already not looking, like for instance, job market's not looking great, at least mostly in tech, and then it's gonna get a lot worse with anything they start replacing with AIs and robots. Fucking clankers. Um, I like robots, and I like like some of the things AI can do, and I like the concept of it, but replacing replacing work and stuff like that and certain types of jobs with automation and stuff, like we already ended up doing that with like manufacturing and stuff, and that or outsourcing, that kind of thing, and it's screwed some people over. It's made a lot of like degrees and stuff, like I didn't go to college or any tech school, um sadly. I wish I did. There were some opportunities too in high school with like a program, but the school system, nor anybody around me, not my friends, not any this, that, or the other, nobody fucking told me that this was even a possibility. So I was ignorant of it until like, getting into high school, and then it's like, oh, I'm already way too fucking late to even get this started, because you can only really do it at the start of high school. For the it was a very new program, more or less. So I have no skin in that game. Um, the only like debt that I have is, like I said, the apartment bullshit mistake, and then just way overspending on necessary things or just dumb shit with like the credit card. With just one. Thank fucking God. That like I knew what I was doing, and for like 2 years I've basically just had no choice but to do like a minimum payment and just never touch the damn thing, or touch it as little as possible, only for like absolute emergencies, because like there's like usually less than $300 on that balance on any given time, and with the way that it was tight for the at least until a couple of months ago, um it was rough. It was really rough. And I knew, and falling into depression and stuff like that. But I I gotta fucking do better. Um, I'm watching a lot of I'm watching a lot of people make the same mistakes that I did with like doom buying, or just allowing that victim mentality to continue to maintain root, and not like getting up and saying to yourself and to your situation that like, no, I can do better, I need to do better, I don't know what I'm worth, but god fucking damn it, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to find my worth myself, or I will die trying, kind of thing. That's kind of where I'm at. Is I That's what I want to do. I just have this weird instinctual drive that it's like, I don't know, I guess it's probably just biology or whatever, but it's like, if I don't improve things now, things will get worse. As Why are my eyes only looking in that direction? I want to look left. No, not my left, the other left. Fuck this weird lighting. um that's another thing that might need some improvement, is some of my equipment, my cameras meh. Anyway, so job hunting has always been kind of difficult, and like nowadays with what's out there, I mean, you've got like the fake, the fake job postings and whatnot for certain things like Indeed, LinkedIn. I I don't know if I could even fucking trust that stuff anymore. Um, Simply because of how much there is just, oh, hey, here's a job listing, but you're not going to hear anything for like the next 6 to 8 months because it's not a needed immediate opening. They're looking to have a backlog of people for when they have to fire someone or when someone inevitably leaves, kind of deal. Um, so that's a bit of a demoralizer, but I've just got to like get out through that and kind of push through it. But I need more income. Like is as far as like my last tax return, which was a full year working at the pizza place that I work at, um, I made roughly 25 to 26,000 dollars that year, around that range, and that's not enough. I've kind of run the math on like going absolute, like living alone, not with like a roommate, because thank fucking God that I room with my best friend, and that's helpful. Um, to share a roof on your head, but like if I had to go out on my own and like live even in like either smaller conditions or like surviving in the economy, it's like I need it like minimum 40 to 45,000 a year kind of deal with the cost of living around here. So it's like, uh, I need to I need to get off my ass and find something better, something that actually kind of challenges me to a little bit of a degree, but also I just need more I just need more capital. Um, so that I don't stay drowning and like submitting like meager amounts of money into my bank account, or to make like a decent sized little purchase or something like that, even just like groceries or this, that, or the other. It's like, okay, I can buy groceries, and then if something happens, I'm gonna be pinched, or I'm gonna be damn near screwed unless I get some really good tips or something within like the coming week or something. I can't live under that fucking stress anymore. Um, um, this is, like I said, in a way, this is a public notice of like I'm taking accountability for myself and my actions and my parts in them, while also, of course, still taking into account the the troubles I've had, because that stuff factors in. But at the end of the day, you have a will and you have a choice, and I chose poorly. I chose not to seek the better options. I chose not to inform myself on things that I needed to to know, or things that I could do, or um, just stuff like that. One of the things that, like, one of the driving reasons for like the way that I decide to present myself online, as far as the avatar, as far as some of the words and phrases I've used on Twitter, the illusions of like, hey, a bunch of cartoon horses are doing things better than us. Um, why aren't we? It's actually very simple, that kind of stuff. And mentioning like, hey, I want to make something akin to like a breakdown of like a question, like like Gen 4 MLP Friendship is Magic, like a breakdown of their society. Um because I one of my big coping strategies through some of my teens, like I found a friend introduced me to MLP when I was I 13? I was still pretty young, but season 2 was out, and it was a few months before season 3 dropped, is when I got into that. And I was young, but I was young, and it was one of those things where it's like you're kind of embarrassed to be watching like a show for little girls, even though a bunch of people that are older than you, and upon looking at some of them, still have childish elements. Not to say that's bad, but to have like childish elements within their character, and it's like, okay, kind of, or like liking cartoons and all this, and it's like, okay, I can understand why many men and women across different age groups would end up liking this. But it also came out during like the golden age of cartoons, or at least like the later end of the golden age of cartoons, because I'm pretty sure that ends around 2012 to 2014. And I'm pretty sure MLP aired on, I think it was October 10th of 2010 is when they launched the series, the initial series premiere. Um, but with it being in that golden age of cartoons, there are there's a lot of deeper stuff in the presentation, with some of the writing, just some of the environmental bits. MLP is one of those shows where if you're not just paying attention to the characters on the screen and whatnot, if you're looking around in the background, you can get glimpses about like a largely fully, well, it gets more fleshed out, messily so, I would say, in a lot of the later seasons, where you get to see more of like Equus, which is like what they call their planet and stuff like that. And you get to see more of actual like Equestria, the country, some of the cities, some of the towns, some of the places, some of the other things that live around there and all that business. But it's largely a functioning like world if you just kind of pay attention to the background and make some of, at least some, you got to think about it a little bit, I guess. And that's kind of what I ended up doing, is like things got a little rougher going into like high school and later end middle school and stuff like that. And I've always had a I've always had a question asking kind of mind, and I like to find things out that I'm interested in, and I kind of ended up
Got it.
getting a little
What
obsessed.
a
And
sniper this is.
there were things that I wasn't like taught as a kid, or really shown good examples of as a child or a teenager or even like an adult. And
Around here doing this.
it's really weird. MLP filled some of those holes, and then also with like the presentation and the interactions between some of the characters, or like how the ponies treat nature, how they treat technology, how they do this, that, or the other, more or less brought me into a position to where I asked a lot of questions, and I thought about it, that kind of stuff, very deeply. And um I was a big fanfic reader as well. I used to read a lot, and I don't do that anymore, and it's a bit of a lost skill. And I can still read, but I just have very little drive to do that, and it's like, ugh, I gotta fix that. I gotta return to form somehow. But
Nice.
one of the big things that really struck out to me with ponies in particular is how very honest and not only how honest and like forthcoming like they are just in general most of the time, but it's also that upon looking at the show and like actually trying to dissect like some of the ancient history stuff, which I will actually do a little bit here, just for the as a little, I guess, a little introduction into the pony dissection of society series that I kind of want to throw together a little haphazardly. Part of this little end of this is like, um, I kind of want to do like a full on Ken Burns style documentary kind of thing, um, with like, you know, images and examples and stuff like that, and like, I don't know if I can fucking throw together like some maps or some graphs, that kind of thing. Like actually make something of really good quality, which probably will not be happening uh, until at least next year, because like I said, I have trouble getting thoughts out, and this is also kind of practice for it. But one of the major things is that, or a couple of the major things, they know what they are. In fact, their society is like largely built around like what's your sub race, what's your genetic background, what did your ancestors and stuff kind of do for a living, because a lot of times that stuff like runs in the family. Apple family is a great example where for hundreds and hundreds of years we're talking of an entire clan of like I don't know over 100 members probably. I don't know if the first I don't know if the initial starting episode or some of the other ones later on. I'd have to go back and rewatch some of the later ones where you get to see more of the Apple family to like get a good head count on some of the members. But it's like a big family that's all across the country, and they all just pretty much have something to do with growing apples or things you can do with apples. So it's like that shit runs in the family. Um, so they know what they are, and they have for a long time because it seems like they decided to be honest with themselves um, upon at least upon the founding of Equestria. That seemed to be a major tenet of theirs of just like being very plain and honest with themselves. Um, and a big last night I in order to kind of prepare for this, I rewatched the what's essentially like their Christmas episode, at least for the early seasons, which was Hearthswarming Eve, which is like more or less the plot, like the plot wise of the episode, like without getting into the actual history reenactment bit. It is like a play retelling. Um, the Hearthswarming Eve pageant, as they call it, is a traditional yearly retelling of the literal founding of their country, like a long, long time ago. And the major lesson to one of the, like there's a few lessons in there to kind of take apart and whatnot, but the major lesson is that you cannot like be completely blind to your own actions and um what that has like how your actions and and such have complicated your own situation. um and all throughout the series, especially with like how they deal with nature and how they deal with each other, how they improve themselves, how they deal with technology, it's an entire society built on large where like en masse we're talking about fairly responsible for their actions and how they're what they do and how it impacts the world. Like they actually get what I call it is they give a shit. Basically, they give a shit, and accountability and like being honest with yourself is literally like the key to them actually stopping their fucking squabbling when they were not united between the sub races. Uh, okay, so at least to get I mean, I guess to kind of paint the picture a little, to more or less paint the picture a little bit of like setting the example and like thinking about the the underlying lessons there, more or less. Uh, Way back before Equestria was ever founded as like a country or whatever, the three tribes, as they were called, which is mostly just the three sub races, wanting absolutely nothing to do with the others, for largely very petty reasons and like squabbles and this, that, or the other. Like, okay, you got like the dirt ponies, the earth ones. They grow all the food. That's more or less even to the modern day of Equestria. That's largely what they still do. Although earth ponies, as far as their specialities, have diversified a little bit with the growing of their technology and the growth of their society and whatnot, which is an interesting kind of thing to look at maybe later on. Um, and they're the ones on the ground. They grow all the food because they're the ones who are good at it. They have the best luck with it. But it's also that they decided to stay in like the fertile, like the quote unquote fertile valleys and stuff of the old land, like the old continent. Like equestrians are on like two different continents, as far as I could tell, to some extent. Um, but um, you've got the earth ponies doing all the growing and stuff. You've got the pegasi, which I forgot exactly how like military that they were actually presented as within that episode. The Pegasi are actually a very proud, competitive, very warlike people in their ancient history. And you can still see elements of that because a large number of Pegasi are actually within like the Royal Guard or hell, the Wonderbolts, which is basically like the equivalent of the United States is like Blue Angels, um, like uh, like jet fighter stunt group kind of thing, um, which are also, I believe, most if not all of those pilots also former military, and someone like Spitfire and Soren, they're military. They're in the military, so they're still carrying on a legacy and characteristics of you know being real rough and tumble and whatnot. I admire them. I admire them for that in some ways. And then on the other side, with the third one, you've got the unicorns, and built like they basically like lived in the mountains as far as like it is presented um within that ancient history episode there. And there's some bits that, like, the canon is kind of a as far as like certain bits of history is actually a mess across the whole show. I definitely will end up doing an entire rant, I guess is the best way I could put it, on that. But it is at least said that like the unicorns were the ones responsible for like the raising and lowering of the moon, which is interesting that they had to do that before Tia and Luna were like around, and like not the princesses, but like maybe it's weird. The princesses are not mentioned in that era of history, which at a certain point leads me to believe that they didn't quite know what they were doing. And then also for other things where like the unicorn second in command mentions Star Swirl the Bearded, which is said to have been alive during Tia and Luna actually running the place and like doing things with them, and that is later confirmed in the show. But then it's like, well, this is a long time before then, so what the hell is going on, kind of stuff. That I'll have a whole episode on that. But more or less, every single every each tribe more or less depended on each other for different reasons. um Earth ponies made the food, the Pegasi made the weather, which could help make the food, but it could also keep the skies clear, necessity stuff like that. And then if it wasn't just like raising and lowering the sun and stuff, the unicorns can get some shit done because they're magic as fuck. And it seems like they have a decent number of spells in the repertoire. But like I said, Mr. Star Swirl being mentioned that early in history is a little strange because that guy more or less revolutionized magic as they knew it during the time that he was alive. Um, but they all depended on each other for something, and more or less the Earth ponies were basically at the bottom of the rung because, well, everyone needed something from them, food to live and all of that business. Well, at a certain point, and it's not exactly explained how or why, but the leaders and some of the tribes, like actual tribes ponies and stuff like that, started having issues with each other, to the point of like just probably forgetting exactly why things started to get bad and stuff like that. But uh, at a, Equestria is a weird place where like there's like weird magical creatures and dangerous things and whatnot around, and their continued and increasing squabbling and hatred, and probably a hell of a lot of, especially considering the Pegasi, if we're going to be realistic, a lot of heavy slap fighting, or possibly, you know, maybe a little Minecrafting in there here and there. Who knows? Ponies can be fucking brutal if they want to be, and they definitely have the capabilities for it. So I wouldn't put it past them. But their bullshittery more or less attracted some not so great like magical creatures that called the Wendigos, that are basically just like weird spirit sky horses that feed off of like strife and chaos and negative emotional energies and whatnot. There's actually a lot of Like I said, Equestria is fucking terrifying. There's actually a fair number of types of creatures that do such a thing, and they are problems, like legitimate problems. But as far as what the Wendigos do, is that they basically take that a lot of that like emotional negative energy, and that's their fuel source. And then their expulsion of power is like the removal of like thermal energy and like causing horrid like snow and wind and weather and whatnot. So basically they managed to turn what was a decent area of like the old country and whatnot into an uninhabitable, like they were turning it into a wasteland. um Earth ponies couldn't grow any food. The Pegasi were getting blown out of the skies. The unicorns, their magic, it wasn't strong enough. They couldn't figure anything out to fucking stop this stuff. Um, and they end up deciding to try to have a summit to talk some things out and get it all hammered out. And it didn't go very well. Mostly because the heads of each of the tribes were a bunch of petty fucking sissies. And were so focused on like they were mostly focused at like pointing fingers, I guess hooves in this case, but they were too busy on pointing fingers to actually look at themselves and to see how they were making the situation worse for themselves or even for their own people, either by their own actions or by constantly being in disagreement of like the other tribes that they actually depended on. In which I kind of look at the world we have today, where with all the with some of the war and some of the resource dependencies and like stuff like, it's just like, okay, we're just watching the same fucking thing. It's the same thing, except now except we're humans and we have nukes, and this is hard. It's horrid. I should to clarify. I sound like I said hard, like charge of the horde and stuff like that. It's horrid. We have horrid capabilities, but um, when the summit goes bad, the leaders of the tribes and their second hands and such decide. Well, mostly it was like the second hands, to some degree, at least for some of the tribes, decided, hey, maybe it's actually best if we just left and if we just found our own area to populate and make it our own. So that way we don't have to we can prosper and we cannot have to deal with the other, two groups that like, hey, it doesn't matter if we can breed. It doesn't matter if we all look alike. That guy's got a cone on his head. That guy's got wings on his head. That guy's got none of them. They're not like us. They're bad. Kind of thing. Just that kind of thing. So conveniently, all of the tribe heads decide to end up doing this all at the same time, and they end up wandering slash trekking into uh, probably somewhere around like what is now like northeastern Equestria. If they weren't already like somewhere a bit further up and like around the corner, they basically started getting more into the mainland of like the main Equestria continent. Um, well, very quickly after taking stakes at like calling this place home, they very, very quickly realize, oh, the other two, our competition, decided to show up around the same time. And that causes problems, and with the heads of the tribes just being petty and stuff, it immediately went fucking wrong. So much so that the amount of like hatred and bullshit that they were spewing at each other attracted more of these fucking Wendigos. It followed them. Their problem, because they did not change things, followed them. So they end up having to hide in a fucking cave, and then the heads of the leaders. I keep wanting to say heads of state. They're not really states. They were just tribes at the time. But the heads of the tribes just kept doing their bullshit. The Wendigos found a way in. The uh, the leaders end up getting frozen solid, and the second hands, the second in commands and whatnot, have differing ideas on like what's going wrong and all of this business, and they find that they actually have that in common, and that they kind of bond over that kind of thing. And it at the brink of maintaining of getting the same fate as their leadership, which is getting frozen fucking solid, and then you're gonna freeze to death and all that. It's not fun. But in the um, at the cusp of meeting the same fate, uh, the whole friendship bullshit, magic MacGuffin, whatever uh, stuff sparks, and they more or less because of like they're deciding to put all of that stuff down. At least for the second hands, is powerful enough to be like an antidote or like a poison to um, or at least antithetical to some degree to what the Wendigos actually feed off of. So they were at least able to save themselves. Um, the heads of state ended up still being, I said heads of state. They still were like frozen and whatnot for a time, but um, upon finally getting melted out and like de-thawed and whatnot, they even too realized like, oh, we're all the reasons for our problems, and we all have each a very deep part to play in all of this, and we have done nothing for like this portion of our lives. We have done nothing but make it hard on ourselves, hard on our people, and we literally we are literally the reason for causing a near apocalypse on ourselves. um and at that point, they decide to band together, mark the new territory, and call it Equestria, as in, all of equestrian kind, all ponies and whatnot. Or, this is it's like we gotta actually, if we're gonna actually do this, if we're gonna survive, if we're gonna thrive, we can't be doing the fighting stuff. We kind of have to do it together. Because it turns out we're not so different, and we all have talents, abilities, and stuff that we can do that we all need each other for. And the most productive thing we can do is not constantly shit on each other and be mean and cause problems. So that is something that has always kind of stuck with me in the back of my mind. Of sometimes you are the reason. Sometimes it's not necessarily like the circumstance of like the out of like what's going on the outside, um, or anything like that. Sometimes it is like life will throw things at you. Um, Life will throw things at you, and it will be it will add difficulty to whatever it is that you're trying to do. But like I said, at a certain point, everyone's got a choice, and um, sometimes the right choice is to shut the hell up and take a good, long, cursory, and honest look at yourself. And you have to do it over and over again, because sometimes the brain likes to play tricks on you. It likes to not change. It likes to be comfortable. But humans, to some degree, are masters of change. At least some of us. Those that are not completely used to comfort all the time are, I would say, a bit less susceptible to falling into comfort and like immobility of like the person immobility of like personhood, or the in mind and whatnot. And that's a it's an important lesson that I admittedly did not take to heart early enough, or strong enough early enough. And in a I had a prediction for this year, and I've had a couple for the last couple of years, especially since things started getting weird during like Biden's administration, and like things were breaking or getting screwed up, or like, oh hey, why are our food processing plants like burning down and all of that business, or like why are we just suddenly killing millions of chickens for quote unquote bird flu and all of this business, when eggs used to be cheap and all of that business. Um, but some of the predictions involved being like okay, this like 2022 2023 was like the year that things were going to start getting weird, but it's not going to be enough to notice. um People are still going to be making excuses, like basically things are going to start to break, but it's not going to be enough to start shaking the mold, other than people who already are willing to be looking at like the inefficiencies and problems of like the world or the country, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2024 was going to be every like certain things are going to start falling apart. Like it's going to get unpleasant, it's going to get weird, it's going to get there's going to be weird breakdowns on certain things like technology because I started to pick up on that people like with DEI and I don't mean to be racist with that or anything, but with like DEI hiring and stuff like that, it's they're picking they're picking skin color and like grow up conditions versus like actual talent, which is also very unequestrian because they are sort of a class based and largely I'd say a largely special and subspecial class based mm, kind of free market meritocracy. The meritocracy part is mostly when the government gets involved, or like having like the government specialists and all of that around. But ponies strive to be like the best. Ponies strive to be like the best that they can be, and they take if a pony really enjoys what they do, if they enjoy their talent, if they enjoy their neighbors, they're gonna actually give. They're gonna give a damn, a lot more so than we do as humans. And I started to see how that could have been a problem, or not even just necessarily the DEI stuff, but and like some of the consequences that can come from that, but also just the lack of funding for certain things, the lack of attention to certain things, the ever increasing, almost like exponential at this point of things kind of getting expensive and whatnot over COVID, but also people just getting really tired of like bullshit or weird bullshit or suddenly extra bureaucracy and extra steps because of COVID or because of policy this, policy that, company policy this, et cetera, et cetera. Lobbyists this, lobbyists that, that kind of bullshit. Um, but 2024 was going to be when enough things were going to happen that people were going to like even the normies were going to start to notice that things are not right. Things are not okay. And a lot of things happened. Boeing, um, let's see, we had things like Boeing, we had the train crashes, just infrastructure failures, this, that, the other. Like things were showing their age and showing the lack of care given to them and whatnot. And then for this year, my prediction was this year was going to be a reckoning. I don't know if it was going to be the reckoning, but as far as what I mean by reckoning, I'm talking like karma finally coming back and slapping everyone in the ass for their bad behavior. Sometimes really hard, sometimes a little soft, but as far as like how it's gone this year, I've watched a few like dozens and dozens of government officials and YouTubers to media people, uh company bigwigs, that kind of stuff just make absolute not only just make absolute fools of themselves, but their histories of bad behavior are like becoming on full display. And not even just like cancel culture, but like social, like a large portion of like online society or real world society being very well notified that it's like, oh, this person is an absolute piece of dog shit. Um, and then losing the things that they've built, um, or cheated their way to get to, like the cracks of people and other things like showing, and we're going to be and like they were feeling the results of that. Um, and over this, especially over like the late spring, like the spring and the summer this year, I keep looking back at myself and some of the things that just I keep looking back at myself and a lot of the mistakes and just massive fuck ups and just not caring that I've had in my life. And in a lot of ways, I've experienced a reckoning of my own, not only just having to like change the way I think in some ways, which if anyone has ever changed their thinking enough to where like the bits of your brain and your neurons are actually having to draw new connections and whatnot, it can be uncomfortable. It can be painful sometimes, even if something change. Like for me, every time something changes really really fast mentally or like a worldview, I get like I get a big headache for like a while. It kind of sucks. I'm kind of used to it at this point. I've only done so about 7 or 8. I've only had to completely change my some of the things I view on the world or my worldview itself like a good 6 to 8 times over the last decade. So I'm kind of used to it at this point, but it's never fun. It's never fun when it happens, but when it's over and something new and better has settled in, it gets easier. Um, I've had a lot to review on myself and my actions and my life and particular ideologies and whatnot that I have like subscribed to, and one of the big ones obviously because they mention it a lot is ponies and like their ways of life, their ways of being and whatnot. And uh, for a couple of weeks I've been in a bit of a depressive fit. It's kind of I'm kind of getting out of it a little bit here now, but you know, I've been a I've tried doing orienting my life or how I deal with people or how I deal with myself in many ways to how the ponies do it, because I found that it was not only reasonable once you figure out how like people actually work, how like the mind works. Like I've dipped into a lot of different things to try to not only understand myself but understand people, and particular experiences or strange weirdness things that have happened in my own life have also driven me and given me opportunities to learn from. Um, and as much as I've like touted ponies pretty much for the last decade of my life, I have been, and as much as I wear, I wear the face of one, at least online. I've been a poor fucking example of, I guess, trying to be them. And in a way, you can't necessarily be them because one, they're cartoon characters, but they're, if you're getting down to the nitty gritty, they're a completely different species. They're based on like horses and ponies and stuff like that, which biologically and naturally speaking, they have very different motivations and drives and stuff than humans. So like their culture is different, their priorities are a little different, the ways that they do things are a little different. But I kept finding that, a lot of it, when you boil it down and you be realistic about it, is reasonable. And I Earth isn't doing well um across the board. We haven't been good stewards of our planet here anymore. We're at the point where we're just scarring the planet. We've if like climate change science and stuff is, if whatever of the climate change science is legit, because there, it wouldn't shock me if there's like screwed up data and stuff here somewhere. I think climate deniers are really dumb to a degree, because some of them, especially if they're like Christian oriented, think that humanity is too small to be able to have a massive impact on like the creation that they live on. If you're going to talk from the Christian perspective, which I used to be, I still kind of am, or at least there's some elements that I've maintained there in my spirituality. Like I believe in God still, but not in the ways that I grew up with, and not in the ways that most people present. um I've if you're kind of going through the mentality of like, oh, Christ walks with you, or God is always just kind of sitting there behind your shoulders and just kind of waiting for you and whatnot. It's My life has been weird, my life has been rough, but at the same time I can see where, like, not to sound like a fucking schizo, but I can see where like the hand of God and the hand of fate both have kind of graced my life, I suppose. And it has. I prayed for many things as a child, and one of the things that I had prayed for was like not only understanding people but myself, my family, because I was an odd one out. Um, I was a very odd child compared to the rest of my family. I got teased a lot and all that business. Had trouble. Uh, I had trouble with certain types of people and whatnot. And I didn't understand myself, and I wasn't given an environment growing up to be able to understand myself. I was a servant to I was a servant to a man child and to, I guess, a woman child too. And at least for my mother, she has far better excuses than for her behavior or her ways or her actions and whatnot than I would say my father does, to a degree. Again, there's choice there, but you know, things happened. Things were real fucked up and with my mom growing up and stuff like that, that kind of stuff. Um, but I didn't understand myself. I didn't understand the world. I was very sheltered and whatnot, and I wanted to not be that. After at about 14, I had 14 to like early 15 years. I'd prayed for, I did the Solomon thing kind of, I guess. I prayed for wisdom and I prayed for experience and I prayed for something that would allow me to understand things better. And I found with I found with like God and like certain ends of that kind of spirituality that you will get exactly what you ask for. It's not necessarily in the ways that you expect it to happen, but if you ask for something that is a challenge, that is for growth, that is for reason or anything like that, for wisdom, whichever, sometimes he'll answer, and it gets kind of spicy after that. And it sometimes you don't even know that you're in a lesson until you're halfway through it and you've made a lot of fucking mistakes, or years down the line when you finally have time and decide to finally go back through some of the more troubling times and you get to actually learn lessons not only from yourself but go back and retroactively uh, understand things about the situations you were in or some of the people involved, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and I've had a lot of that this year, especially recently. Again, I'm kind of making this for the sake of accountability, and I've been recording for like an hour and a half at this point. I've just been rambling. Um, Hopefully, this kind of makes some sense. There will be some things cut in and out of here because there was some dead time and whatnot, but um, I've got at the start of this year, I made a pact with myself to start to do better and to improve things and habits and whatnot. And some things I have, but I keep getting this feeling that it's time to do more. It's time to actually go for growing up. Uh, in a lot of ways, I'm 20. I'm almost 26, but again, in a lot of ways, I'm still very much immature. Um, Still scared of certain things, still nervous, and a lot of that comes from a lack of experience or bad experiences, and then not knowing what my worth is because I just let myself be contained um, for way too long, and the some of the mentalities and like the ways of I was taught for like the religion I grew up, the version of the religion I grew up in. I grew up very poisoned. Um, uh, I think it's been like almost 2 months at this point, but I released the last thing I ever released on my YouTube was the boss fight that I had with Slave Knight Gale, and the song that I put in there was I wrote it myself. I didn't write the music, that the instrumental and the vocal, the as far as like the singing part and stuff. That's all Suno AI. I've had some fun with it, and I would kind of use it to explore my emotions by writing, by taking those like feelings or some of those scenarios that I've been through and like running it through and just using it as an aid to process some things. But that particular song was different in certain ways because I was doing a lot of like I was looking into a lot of like Carl Jung type stuff and like dealing with the shadow, which I found that a lot of my own issues are very shadow related. And I do with all the young stuff, I ended up watching Fight Club for the first time, and then seeing like, oh, this is more or less what it kind of looks like uh, when at least the shadow and concept becomes its own thing, and then it starts to rule you, and all the things that you avoided, all the things that you boxed up, all the things that you denied and lied to yourself about, they come back with a vengeance, and it will consume you. Um, and with playing through like Dark Souls and some other games and whatnot that I've played, it's Dark Souls 2 especially, that was on full fucking display. I mean, the whole story of Vendrick and Nishadra, whatever the hell her specter skeletal fucking grossness name was, um, the lady on the throne in Dranley Castle that turns into a skeleton monster at the end. It I found that the narrative of that game had a lot of elements of my own life and some of the things I was thinking about. So it really put, I'm so very fucking glad that I decided to play Dark Souls 2 when I did. Um, and I'm very glad. And I know I don't have like a lot of viewers and whatnot most of the time. Right now, I don't kind of, I kind of care about it because I want to grow the channel and whatnot. But as far as like it having a humongous impact on my mental state or my ego, it's like, look, I know what the situation is. This is a tiny stream. I'm just starting out. I'm only doing like 1 day out of the week most of the time. So it's like the growth is going to be limited. The outreach is going to be limited. But it 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 made me want to look real deep at myself. And I was kind of in the middle of some like Jungian meditation and like just kind of looking over some things, and I had this feeling um that like the bits of my brain that you know you can't really process, like the unconscious, subconscious, whichever, like it, like there was something in there that was trying to come out as far as like putting the lesson together with like Dark Souls 2 and the Jungian stuff and like what is like more or less what I needed to do. And that song for the Gale fight, the second half at least, was kind of written in an what I guess I can describe as a, it was very emotional. And as I was writing the song and like listening to those deep parts of my mind, I was having, you know, lots of flashbacks, emotional reactions. Like I was, for writing a good majority of those lyrics, I was just physically shaking like a Parkinson's patient. Um like that was a, it was a major emotional release, and as far as that song goes, a lot of it alludes to and some of it symbolizes a lot of things in my personal life, but it was a lot of stuff that I also found present in Dark Souls. Like I said, found parallels, but um, I had written that song with the intention of making some kind of supercut, and there's two versions of that song because Suno AI spits out two. Um, one, the original is not the one. The original one that I liked is not necessarily the one that is present in that video. That is the second one that came after. I think they got to 4.0 on their AI or 4.5. It was a major improvement, so I reran the song, and that's the one that came out, and it was pretty. It's pretty banger. Um, but um, I I put that song. And I wanted to do a supercut of like the DS2 footage that I had to kind of go along with it, and you know, it was a journey. And I may end up doing that. I don't want to reuse a song that I've already used, even if it's a little different. But it was nice. It was a nice idea. And I might, like I said, I might still do it. But doing the Gale fight for Dark Souls 3, for those of you who are not familiar with Dark Souls 3 in particular, Dark Souls 3 in particular, Slave Knight Gale is regarded as the true, as far as if you have all the DLCs and whatnot, which the game isn't complete unless you have all the DLCs. Um, Slave Knight Gale is considered the definitive final boss of Dark Souls, or of Dark Souls 3 at least. Maybe, I mean, Dark Souls series is over, as far as we know. Um, so I don't know. I guess he is the definitive final boss of like the entire trilogy. But Slave Knight Gale is one of those boss fights that, whether or not you have time in Dark Souls 3 or any of the other Souls games, even if you're kind of good at them, like not necessarily hundreds of hours or anything like that, which at the point that I played, that I started to actually pick up 3 and stream it and stuff, I had about 400 hours already. Although the majority of that was messing with the sandbox because I never actually finished the game prior, mostly because it doesn't seem like it was time for it to be finished yet. Again, fate and weirdness kind of ended up playing into it was one of those things where it's like, this is now the time for it. Um, I wasn't mature enough, I wasn't controlled enough to have the patience or the ability to like play Dark Souls as well as I can now. Although with one, I am constantly embarrassing myself in my opinion. Um, but it is, like I said, older game mechanics bringing that up. But some of the elements of Slave Knight Gale's like story, his backstory, the things that he had to do, I found more parallels in that. And the conclusion I came to was that I, not only with how that boss fight went, but with how I performed with his story and stuff, I found someone who mirrored a lot of a few elements of my life, but also as far as the past of him of like being a slave in some knight army that, I don't know exactly where. It's been a while since I've read the item description, but um he still seemed to have kept the title of slave knight. But I look at what he did, what he tried to do for the painted world of Ariandel, and he decided to not be a slave and to serve. I guess not be a slave, but he decided to serve instead of be a slave. And his mission was ultimately to save his people within a rotting painting, which, in Dark Souls, special paintings like that are basically pocket dimensions. I don't know if they're safe from the bullshit that happens outside of them necessarily, at least until you like set the painting on fire or like destroy it or something like that. Because Ariandel was falling apart, um, in more ways than just losing space, like inches on that scroll. But I found that in the end, when he gets to the ring city and he's still trying to help the player and stuff like that, I'm not sure if he's like in his own little parallel world because of how Dark Souls is weird and how it works and whatnot. But by the time you find him, he has slaughtered all but like 3 living creatures in the at the edge of the world, while the rest of the world outside was literally crumbling within itself, like black hole style, slowly. Um, and he had found like the shreds of the dark soul, which for like souls darkness, for like Dark Souls darkness, dark, like that kind of magic is humanity. Humanity is classified as a dark creature from in and out. And there's an irony to how Gwyn decided to handle humanity, because he found that the soul of the dark soul of men could be just as strong, if not stronger, than like the gods and whatnot. And the reason the undead curse is even there in the first place is because he branded he branded the undead and closed off like the dark sign. If you look at it, it's a ring of fire around like it's a ring of fire containing swirling darkness. It is a representation of a fun of like changing the fundamentals of the world and making it a prison, more or less. And humans can't die. They don't die. They just go. They come back after a while because the light's there, and but you lose bits and pieces of yourself every time, or just over time you will, because you can't die. You just grow old and keep going, and then you just keep getting worse and worse and worse, and you start falling apart unless you have something to focus on, or a great mission, or whichever, something that keeps you, more or less. um and Gale was trying to save his people from that kind of a fate, which is why the paintings were there in the first place. But in order to like fix the world, he needed the dark soul as a pigment, and the lady who was going to paint the next one had to see flame. And that flame is like Sister Frida was also an unkindled, but she decided to leave, so she was kind of flame-ish. But um in effect, the player is meant to be the kind of flame that the painter lady is meant to actually see. And at the edge of the world, at the end of time, you have to fight Gale, and he's consumed shreds of the dark soul, all that was left, because again, things are not great and people are dead and weak in power. But consuming the dark soul bits and whatnot, he started to go crazy and started seeking the dark souls of all the pygmies, and which are, I think, humans technically, but the pygmies and humans and whatnot of the Ring City, until he had slaughtered and eaten everything. And it was a necessary evil, because when you fight him and when you defeat him, he drops the dark soul. It had been reborn within him, and it's exactly the thing that you need to like fix the painting and all that business. And something about a lot of it was a lot of my realization with like that fight was watching, was that like, okay, someone you like, someone you love, someone who used to be normal and noble and honorable, those people have every potential to become monsters if they let themselves do so. Or sometimes it's just how life has to go, where some people have to play antagonist, some people have to play villain for other people to have something to butt up against, to change, or this or that or the other. And I found that a lot of the elements of that kind of thing, and then having to confront and fight something that you liked, someone that you loved, that kind of thing, it mirrored my own life. Like, I've talked a lot about my dad and whatnot, and him just kind of crumbling and really not being a great father in ways that were going to be good for me or my brother in some ways. um with some of the calls of my grandparents, I get to hear things about how they're doing over there in their little pocket, and it's miserable a lot of the time. And not to say I'm not miserable. I'm miserable in different ways. Again, I'm feeling the um I'm dealing with the I'm going through the reckoning of my own actions, more or less, but I can see it for what it is, and I can see me for what it is. Um, and the Gale fight was really cemented in me that, at least if you're going to talk like the grand scheme of like fate and all of that stuff, a lot of the bullshit that happened like growing up with like my family was necessary in order for me to I needed to have an antagonist, some kind of negative motivation to seek different, to do different, etc., etc. And the Gale fight kind of showed me that. And I had found my equal. And so I had took the second version of that song because it, oddly enough, it had fit perfectly with the pacing of the fight and whatnot. And I made that because I realized, I had found my equal, and I had a big thing that was bothering me on my mind and whatnot personally had finally been settled. Um, it's it still hasn't been easy since then. There's still like a lot of emotional business to have to clean up and do and whatnot. So I've still got some things to hammer out there, of course. But I guess all of this big rambling of like mistakes I've made and things, some bad habits and things that I've done, things that I've gone through, and um, mistakes I've made. I've already said mistakes I've made, but and bringing up like the lesson of ponies and like with the whole point of like why I choose to look like them on the internet and kind of bring them up and stuff is I had the opportunity. A lot of things in my life had pointed to me that like the way that we do things, the way that I did things, the way that we did things in the family, the way that we do things on Earth. I mean, it's very obvious at this point, but we're fucked. Like we're not doing well. Um, we're the most connected that we have ever been on this planet as far as like having the internet, phones, all of that kind of business, being able to cross the planet within like 24 hours or less, depending on your mode of travel. Um, and yet we have allowed, we, again, I emphasize we collectively have allowed ourselves to I guess fall and crumble into the just crumble into the abyss. And it's not it didn't exactly happen by accident. um some of that I may end up talking about, but you could probably find some stuff on, hey, here's how the world actually works and here's why there's weird coincidences and here's a lot of interesting names that are connected to a lot of interesting things, and a lot of interesting decisions were made that completely fucked everything up. And I kind of make this. I mean, again, I make this video to hold myself to hold myself accountable for my own actions. But one of the things that is largely missing from humanity, and I think I've said this before on stream, is accountability is fucking gone with our species as far as like how we're operating right now. And it has cost money, it has cost lives, it has cost careers, it has cost the ability to live comfortably. Like at this point we're all basically trapped in some manner of a rat race, um where like like people don't even want to go out on the dates anymore. People can't do it. People can't afford it. People have gotten nasty, but like between the sexes, it's gotten nasty on some fronts with particular kinds of individuals, or like where you like you know where you went to college, where you grew up. Like a lot of stupid, a lot of stupid bullshit has been barring humanity from actually progressing or prospering. And you say, "Oh, we've got all this technology, and that's progress. Is that not progress?" And it's like, no, it's not. Again, to kind of point it back to ponies, I look at the founding of Equestria, and then I look at where they're at now. And as far as like like the starts of the show, or like going to the mid seasons, because again, the later seasons get really weird because they made a lot of decisions to just sell fucking toys instead of tell a good fucking story that made sense. In fact, there are a lot of things that they do after the Gen 4 MLP movie comes out. They start doing things that inherently are anti-equestrian. And I do want to actually bring those up and like kind of make a video about that at some point. I have a lot to say on that subject. More or less, people who wanted to sell toys kind of took something that was nice and beautiful and pissed on it, because of political bullshit, like the post movie, like the MLP movie of Gen 4 and like the seasons that followed after was like the Trump administration, and some of that was clearly the first Trump administration at least, and some of that was clearly trying to be counter commentary to a lot of the discourse on at the time, and I don't blame it. I don't blame it. Looking back at like the first of the Trump's presidency, that could have gone a lot fucking better, and then we're only like what officially like 7 or 8 months into this one, and I'm kind of nothing but I gave him the benefit of the doubt at the start, but with the way that things are going and with the way that public discourse is going, things have not gotten any better. Like, not actually, not really. Things are still expensive. Things are still getting fucked. Things are changing really, really fast. People are uncomfortable. People are scared. People are angry. It's getting worse, in my opinion, as far as I could tell. And I'm a big picture guy. I've always been a big picture guy. I do not see this going very smoothly for the next several years, if we even have that kind of left. And especially with like the Epstein stuff going on right now, where with how weird Mr. Trump is acting, it's like, okay, what are you not being accountable for? What are you not holding your all your business partners and all your rich friends? What do you anyone with a brain knows that they're hiding something, that they're really not wanting to let this go, because I believe at a certain point the Epstein files and the Epstein connections are basically this weird blackmaily linchpin that is holding the the what I call the globo homo together, where we're making the same mistake that the ponies made, where there is quote unquote peace, but there is just so much fucking bullshit between us. And at a certain point, that's going to boil over. And we may end up following in the same footsteps where we end up making a lot of mistakes that we regret. And, the the common man allows for the people that they voted in, or or voting is cheating in, or this, that, the other. The deep state runs the voting system, which also wouldn't shock me. But regardless, we're going to allow a bunch of old motherfuckers who are completely out of touch, and who clearly do not actually care about the world their peoples or this or that or the other, who want to spread harmful ideas, ideologies, or make things worse simply for the quote unquote march of progress, when they clearly don't actually know what progress looks like. They think progress is like everyone pseudo gets along, but not really, because hey, look at Europe right now; it's practically on fire. Um, with a lot of with particular kinds of migratory, one of the I guess human sub races that are likened to migrate around a lot these days, especially into Europe. It's getting weird. Um, and there's a lot of troublemakers trying to get in there, but at the same time, it's like, hey, you should be nice to this guy who is going to where some of these people are you have their own sets of bad behavior because of their ideologies, and it's like you can't mix that. You can't mix that and expect it to go well, because it's not going well. Um like more or less, we're like the earth and how it's operating and like all of that, I feel like it's basically made of toothpick scaffolding and duct tape. And there's a fucking tornado coming, and I don't know when exactly it's gonna hit, but the whole thing is starting to fucking shake. My goal my goal with this video, and with presenting some of the ideas that I have had, is to one, hold myself accountable, and um kind of, I guess, make this like a promise of like, this is, I need to start doing better, and I'm saying it and putting it out in public, and I at that point I that's enough motivation to do so. And I need to do better, because things are probably not going to improve, and if I don't improve along with things not improving, when something horrid happens, or when things get weirder, things get worse, I'm going to be completely unprepared for it, and I don't want to be unprepared for it. And at the same time, I I don't want anyone else to be unprepared for it either. And if, you know, if things end up getting weird or fall apart to some degree or this, that, the other, like more or less humanity has very few legs to stand on with a lot of like the urban monoculture and its beliefs and certain things that it entails, and of course with some of the things that happen and are enacted. We have like post World War II, we more or less lost the moral fabric of humanity that we have had for 99.9% of human history, sometimes in just different forms, but we've completely forgotten the spiritual. We've only exchanged it for the material. We've somehow decided that like post World War II or post Cold War or this or that was like the end of history, and it's like no, history's literally been happening for the last. It's been happening ever since, and that like to say that nothing is going to get different or nothing's ever going to change. Um, as far as like important events that are going to shake the fabric of human existence, that is a fucking fool's perspective because that has already happened dozens and dozens of times since World War II when those ideas were established. It's I don't know what fucking dumb juice that like some of our ancestors and the boomers and some of their parents and stuff were fucking sipping in those times, but it's things are going to get weird, and looking at uh looking at pony stuff and like some of the ways that they do things, it's there are some things that we can learn from, and it's like it's a show for little girls, but it's like look, a bunch of people on earth are basically running around like fucking children, or sometimes, you know, literally children, children, not fun, not fun, not good, not good for the soul, not good for the planet. And at a certain point we're going to have to change some things, or individuals are going to have to change in order to survive or have a better mentality for whichever. And one of the things that I am concerned about is especially like morality and whatnot. We've somehow usurped a lot of morality, just over we've usurped natural law and morality and whatnot for feelings, or you know, someone manipulating your feelings because XYZ happening or being allowed to happen will give them lots of money or give them lots of power and control, or I don't know, maybe they're just sometimes some sick bastards who just want to watch the world burn. Um, and honestly, the more and more that I think about it, a lot of pony philosophy and ways of life is the antidote to a lot of our issues. And the that's really weird to say. Um, I mean, it is really weird to say, but at the same time, I'm not alone in this. Where you know some of the brony community and whatnot taken have kind of taken on some of their traits and some of their ways. I'm sure, um, but um, I mean, it's kind of weird to say it, but if we want a decent template how how we can do better, not only for ourselves but for the world, for each other, for how we treat the world, how we treat our technology, how we march forward with things. Um, it's weird that a little girl show has has a lot to say on how things can be done. And at the least, it inspired this fucking young moron to think about it and to think about the world that I live in, the world that I've created for myself, and the world that we've created for ourselves, and to ask a lot of questions. And we should be asking a lot of questions, and a lot of what we should be asking is sitting down and being very honest with ourselves and asking ourselves, what the fuck are we doing? What the fuck am I doing? And is what the fuck we're doing, is this good for us? You know? And an avalanche is coming down the mountain, and a lot of people don't want to do anything about it. A lot of people are just willing to lay down and die. And I was literally willing to lay down and die a couple of years ago because I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And my life situation was shit, and a lot of that was my own fault, um, for allowing that to happen. But I was one of those people, and I don't want to be anymore. And I don't want to see that kind of fate befall anybody else. It is true that in a lot of ways, with the troubles of humanity in the modern world, that we have had a lot of opportunity, a lot of things taken from us. We are not living in a way that is good for us. None of it, like, Western society is fucking broken, and it didn't have to be this way. Um, I guess in a way, what I'm kind of proposing is an open letter to anybody, including myself, and it's going to be difficult to change and take accountability, because that is painful. Being honest with yourself is very painful. The truth hurts. The truth fucking hurts. But I guess this is, in a way, I guess, to line out this whole video, here's my plan for the channel. Here's what I need to do with myself, and then here's something that I've learned, and here's, I don't know, here's what I see everywhere else. We can't lay down and die. Um, we we need to rage against the dying of the light, but we also cannot forsake the dark. We need to be we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be able to confront ourselves. We need to be able to confront the darkness and the overwhelming oppressive lights that have, taken things. We have to we have to fight for our fucking souls in this time and age of human existence. In a weird way, I see ponies as being, in some of the things that they teach, as being good alternatives, to what we're doing these days. So I would really like to do more. I'd like to do more of these, and I will end up doing more of these. Hopefully shorter and with a bit more centralized subject. But shit, I've rambled for like 2 hours. Goddamn. I'm gonna have to cut some of this down, or have to get more footage or something like that to help fill some of that space up there. But I want to do better. I need to do better. I've touted a greater example, um, than myself, and I have failed to aspire to be it, and I take great shame in that, and that needs to change. And more or less, I guess I invite others to take an ear and, I don't know, take the words take the words of a crazy cartoon stallion on the internet and just think about it for a little bit, because we need to do something different. We can do better. We can be better than what we are, but we have to not run from ourselves. So, I'm recording this the night before a stream. It's almost 4 a.m. Probably end up being up a little while, but it's a bit late to do the cutouts and the editing, maybe. So this may end up going up. This may end up going up Sunday night after I stream, or in the middle of the stream as like I finish it, editing it or whatever. Or I don't want it to be late on like Monday. But maybe it may have to be. It just kind of depends on how it shakes out. But yeah, bit of a long ramble. I hope the Tarkov game and probably whatever else I end up throwing up there was something fun to watch while listening to the ramblings. Um, for anyone who ended up listening and watching this far, I hope that, one, I hope I made sense. Two, I hope that things get better. But in order for things to get better, we have to get up and we have to do something. We have to realize our own power in the situations that we're in, and we need to. You can't let God handle everything. You can't just let the government handle everything. You have to. At a certain point, we're going to have to learn how to be human again. And I think that time is coming very soon. So if we're going to have to relearn how to be human, why not relearn how to do it a little bit better? Because the point of breeding and having children generation to generation is you are supposed to, as a child, you are supposed to call your parents' bluff as far as how they teach you and how the world works and go against their philosophy because it's evolution. You are testing whether or not the way that they say things are and how they do things, whether or not that works. Because if it doesn't work, your parents die. Or if at least in the old days, if it doesn't work, your parents probably die a little bit early. And then for you, being the younger, more ignorant being, um, if you screw up real hard, then you beef it too. You're at a certain point having children are a testing tool for the previous generation, and by God, what have we done? And what have we become? And what have our ancestors done? And what have we allowed ourselves to be? Big things are probably gonna come very soon, and a lot's gonna change real fucking fast, and it's probably gonna be a little scary, or it's probably gonna be really scary. Who fucking knows? But I feel like there is a chance for us to do better, but actually, very soon. And at a certain point, I have this need, this deep needing feeling that this is what I have to do. That I have to be an extra voice in the constant, hey, look at this bullshit, look at that bullshit, but also show a possibility of something different, and then make sense of it, make it logical, make it reasonable. I'm not looking to fucking start a cult or anything here, but all I'm really asking is for and hoping for is something different, something better, but not through sitting and waiting and wasting away, but through great effort and honor and accountability and actually giving a fuck. We need to give a shit. So I'd say that's about the end of this rant. I hope a bunch of this made sense. I'm kind of stream of consciousness here, but this it's important to me. I give a damn. In some ways I didn't. In a lot of ways growing up I didn't, and that was a mistake of mine. And the more and more that I've grown up and with the way that I care about things or people or whatnot because of my experiences and because of some things that I've learned, it's someone's got to sound the horn and, you know, throw shit at the wall and throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks and what tastes better and what is actually more nutritious. And fuck it. Why not me? I'm just some fucking idiot on the internet. So just, take everything with a grain of salt. But I suppose that's about it. So, at least from my perspective, it is almost bedtime for me. So, everyone, I wish you a good night, a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, whichever it may be. And just remember, you're more powerful than you believe that you are. And I think it's time to start leaning back into that instead of just waiting for things to happen or waiting for nothing to happen. Let's make some things happen with our own lives and be the shining light upon the hill kind of thing. Thank you for everyone who got this far. Like and subscribe if you want. Share it if you want. I'm not your boss. I'm just, again, I'm just a moron stallion on the internet. Have a good one.